Trump had won the district 78-18. That's a 60-point margin. We were two college kids with very little experience as organizers the prior year, and we just really didn't know what we were doing. And by the end of the campaign, we got a call about a month away from the election that would completely change the dynamic of the race and the other special elections that were happening at the same time. I'll tell you about that moment at the end of this video. But first, the 4 lessons that race taught me about how campaigns actually win and lose, and the lessons I still use on every campaign. If you're thinking about running or helping someone that is running, this is the video that I wish someone would have sent me 10 years ago. So here's how it happened. I was walking to class one fall day and my phone rang. It was a guy named Jim Skaggs. Jim and I had met a year and a half earlier when I became a delegate for Bernie Sanders at the national convention. He had remembered that I was working on campaigns in 2016 and didn't know who else to reach out to, so just gave me a call out of the blue. And he filled me in on the race. So someone had resigned, which triggered a special election. This has happened a couple other places across the state, and he had just been nominated to be the Democratic nominee for that special election. Now, we got to remember what politics was like back then. This was fall 2017, so Trump had been in office for almost a year now, and there was a lot of backlash to Trump. But also, this district was very Republican. It's located in rural southeast Missouri. Trump had won it with 78%. Hillary only got 18%. She didn't even crack 20. And so with that big of a margin, we knew it was going to be a really tough race. But Jim was the perfect kind of candidate for this race.
I was a volunteer working on A+ schools, testified on that program back in the mid-90s, being the presiding commissioner. I've always been active, trying to give something back, make something better. Running for state representative in District 144th because my father always told me, if you're not at the table, you're what's for dinner.
Overall, the district has 4 counties. It's very rural. The largest town in the whole district is Potosi, Missouri, which has like less than 2,500 people. So it was always going to be a really challenging race. And honestly, we thought if we could get close, it would be good enough. When he called for help, I thought about it for a little bit and decided to give my friend Carter a call, who I just worked with down in southeast Missouri the previous year. Carter and I had just been field organizers for the state party, so we knew how to do some things on campaigns, but we didn't know how to manage a campaign, to build a budget, to manage a candidate, to raise money. There was a lot we didn't know. But that didn't stop us. We called some friends. They said, you should definitely help this guy out. And there wasn't anyone else looking to help him out either. So we worked day and night between classes to pull together a budget, a campaign plan, an idea of what we could do to help Jim out. The first lesson that I took away from this race, and I try to use whenever I can, is how important it is to localize issues. Now, in some races, localizing issues can be difficult. In this race, it was honestly really easy. But I always believe that whether you localize the issue or not, you've got to find stories to tell from the district, from the people who live there. And that's exactly what we did here. Now, ultimately, we ran on 3 issues, very bread and butter, like most people should. We ran on healthcare. In Missouri, they hadn't expanded Medicaid expansion yet, and so we're able to run on that. We ran on education and the importance of public education. In rural Missouri and in most rural places, public education is the backbone of the community, and so we ran on the importance of public education. And then the third issue that we ran on was just jobs, in general, job creation. Now, it wasn't just that we ran on those issues, right? We were able to take that issue, connect it to Jim's background, and connect it to a story in the district. Take public education, for example. Jim had served on the school board for a long time. We were able to leverage that as his background to give him credentials on the issue. And then we made it local by talking about how some school districts were going to school 4 days a week instead of the normal 5 days a week. And so we took an important issue, we credentialed it through Jim's background, and then we connected it to something that was going to impact the residents in the district, which ultimately is public education being cut, which is resulting in 4-day-a-week school days, which is obviously really devastating for a lot of rural communities. And then the second issue that we were able to really localize in just a very real way for folks, and this is one of the examples I use for my clients all the time, is on Medicaid expansion. So at this time, Missouri had not expanded Medicaid, which meant that a ton of hospitals were hurting financially. In fact, in the district about 2 years before the election, a rural hospital has closed. And because of this rural hospital closing, and in a lot of parts of the district. So it'd take you an hour and a half to get to the nearest hospital, which creates this huge, healthcare desert in the district. And, about 6 or 8 months after the hospital closed, a 54-year-old police officer unfortunately had a heart attack who used to live 10 minutes from that hospital. Obviously, now that it closed, it took over an hour to get him to the nearest hospital. And that hour, that 10-minute drive, he could have made it on time, but unfortunately he didn't. He wasn't able to survive because it took so long to get to the hospital. And so this is just an example where, we can take this local issue that really directly impacts the district, right? People are losing their lives because it takes them so long to get to the nearest hospital. We took this local issue, we took Jim's background, we credentialed him, and we told this story throughout the campaign. It was one of our most impactful messages for voters. And ultimately, that's what campaigns need to do. They need to find local issues that are impacting people directly in their district. Yes, you connect it to the national issue, right? Healthcare is a national issue, still is. Very important. But you connect it down to the local level through a story like that so that you can show and demonstrate to people how their lives are being impacted by the policy that you can change if you're elected. The second lesson that I take from this campaign and that I use in all my other campaigns is how important money is. This is one that no one wants to admit out loud, but it's just true. The candidate quality is really important, but the money moves the message. Jim was the perfect candidate. He had grown up in the district. He had spent 10 plus years operating a business that employed people in the district. He was a presiding commissioner of one of the counties that was most populous in the district. So he'd been elected multiple times there, and he was on the school board.
I served on the school board for 16 years, brought A-plus schools to our district. A-plus schools provided an opportunity for students that graduated from 12th grade high school, an opportunity to go on to a higher education.
So he was involved in issues across the whole district. In his home precinct, he ended up winning 80 or 90%, something crazy. And we tried to run up the score as much as we could in Iron County because that's where he was from. So he was very, well known, well liked in the district, and he had just an amazing background. But the reality is that money moves the message. And if you don't have the money to communicate with voters repeatedly, then it's not going to matter, right? We raised and spent about $68,000, something like that. Which is a lot. We were able to do a 3-piece mail program. We were able to fund, some interns calling into the district and some yard signs and those kind of things. We were on radio, I believe, as well. So we were able to do a baseline. I would call this a bare minimum base budget for the race. But we were outspent like crazy. The Republicans spent over $250,000 when you include the outside spending. They sent 8 or 10 mailers, most of them negative on Jim, talking about he had donated to Obama and Hillary. They went all in on negative. They spent a lot of money on this race. I mean, they outspent us over 4-1. And when you're outspent 4-1 in a special election where there's only a few thousand voters, that makes a massive impact, obviously, on the electorate. We were only able to communicate so much through the mail. We didn't do any digital ads. I think we just did a little bit of radio, but they were all over the airwaves. They were all over the mailboxes. They were, doing digital. They were doing everything, throughout the whole race. And so they were just able to beat us over messaging a lot when it came to paid media. And this is a huge lesson that I took from this race, right? My friend and I weren't able to push Jim to do as much call time as we needed him to do. We were still able to do a good base budget. One lesson that I really took from this race is that fundraising isn't just a part of the campaign. It might have to be the whole campaign in some respects, right? It's so important. If you can't raise the money to get your message out, you're just never going to have a chance. And so for a lot of first-time candidates, the reality starts setting in a few months in that call time and fundraising has to be the biggest chunk of the candidate's time. And now for the third lesson on the campaign, organizing, making a difference. We didn't have the money to burn on mail and digital and any of that kind of stuff, but we had manpower and we had a lot of it. So like I mentioned, my friend and I had just been organizers. So we went through our networks and we created an internship program and had about 18 or 20 interns who were calling into the district nonstop every day for 2 months. We had volunteers that would come from St. Louis or from the district that would knock on doors. Now again, this is a very very rural district. I think there was only like 2,000 doors that you could even knock on in the district, and we knocked all of them twice. So we mostly made phone calls. We did 9 passes of our voter universe, which is around 5,500 people. It ended up totaling out to like 54,000 phone calls. So we called every targeted voter in the district 9 times, talking to many of them multiple times on the phone and telling those stories that we talked about, right? We told the story of the 54-year-old police officer who had a heart attack and couldn't get to the hospital in time because we haven't expanded Medicaid, and Jim is going to expand Medicaid when he gets in the state house. We told those stories over and over and over again, and we're able to move the needle through field. And the field program we built is one of the things I'm the most proud of from that campaign. Making those 54,000 phone calls, knocking every door twice that we could, it really moved the needle. You can see this in the turnout from those election results. There was, like I mentioned earlier, there was 4 total elections happening that day, including ours. And in our race, there was 5,708 votes cast. In most of the other races, there was only around 3,000, 2,000 votes cast. So our race had almost double what the other races had in terms of turnout. So clearly, the money the Republicans were spending on paid media in our work with field drove turnout to a whole different level in this district on the same day. And this is a lesson that I take to every campaign, right? Not every campaign you're going to be able to do 8 to 10 mailers, be on the radio, do digital ads the way the Republicans were. In some campaigns, you're only going to be able to do the base. But if you build an intentional, voter contact program, you can reach voters over the phone at the doors multiple times. And while that might not match the Republicans in the mailboxes, those conversations at the doors are super impactful, especially when you're able to have multiple conversations with the same person over a couple months. The fourth and final lesson that I took away from that campaign is that going negative is necessary. And I know a lot of y'all might not want to hear that, but the Republicans went super negative in that race. They sent like 8 mailers. They did a bunch of radio ads. They were doing paid calls, all the things that they could do to go negative on Jim and bring him down. And unfortunately, we didn't have the budget or consensus on the team to go negative. We did a contrast mailer that was okay, but honestly, we had a really good negative story to tell in the district, and we just weren't able to do it, mostly because of budget constraints. And I know that if we could have done it, we would have won that race. And I don't say that lightly. Not a lot of times you can have a definitive look like that, but in my experience since then, anytime you do polling and you see the negative impact, it does have a big impact, and when you don't hit back, you're not able to match it, right? And you lose 10 to 15% sometimes whenever your opponent goes negative and you don't, and obviously, we weren't able to do that here. I had the perfect mailer designed in my head. It was a big "You're fired" stamp across the front. This was 2016, so I was just thinking Donald Trump, The Apprentice, "You're fired" style. And, I had that mailer kind of drafted in my head. I had a pretty good idea. I talked to some consultants and some people about it. But, like I said, we just didn't have the consensus and we just didn't have the budget to get it out there. That ended up getting done, a few years ago, about 8 years after the election. Our opponent decided to run for state senate. And so that mailer did end up getting out there and they were able to run with it in that election. And it made a big difference. She ended up losing by 18 points. And I think that negative really told the story well about her background and why she was a bad fit for the district. And that's really what I want first-time candidates and first-time managers to hear, is that yes, going negative can feel bad, can feel ugly, but it doesn't have to be. And it's about delivering the complete truth and the message to the voters. And at the end of the day, Democrats have to win. We have to do everything within our means to get the job done and win. Our job is to win and then go deliver when we're in office. And if going negative is what it takes to win, then we gotta go negative. We can't just let the Republicans run us over because we want to play nice. Look, I told you at the beginning of this video that I was going to go back in time to when I got that call about the Republican House Committee in a poll. And so, it was 2017. It was getting to the end of the year. At this point, we had been working with Jim for a couple months. We had built a budget. We were raising money. We had brought on our consultants. And we were doing field every day. We were calling voters in the district. And it was starting to show, we could feel the momentum on the ground. We could tell that we were starting to move the needle. But you know, when you're on the ground every day working, you just don't know how much the needle is moving until you get a poll. And that was like the fog clearing. We got a poll that showed us tied. And they also, the Republican House Committee, they also polled the district to the north that was a little bit more, blue than our district. I think Donald Trump won that district by like 9 points, and obviously he won ours by 60. And so the Republican committee was looking at these two polls, and they were going, well, I guess we got to put our last pot of money into this race down south. And so they put the last $25,000 into our race. Obviously, that was detrimental to us. We ended up losing. We lost by 299 votes, which was just like 4.5%. So it was still very close. We still swung the district 54 points from Donald Trump's margin, which is massive, and something that I'm still super proud of to this day. But, that poll did mean that they finished us off, but actually up in House District 97, the Democrat ended up winning. And so that's a lesson in this, right? Even whenever you can't win a race, you can still win and find ways to win by pushing the margin, forcing the Republicans to spend money on a race they never should have. Donald Trump just won this district by 60 points. They should have had to spend like hardly any money, and they spent over $250,000 defending that seat. And so we pushed the margin, we changed the battlefield for the special elections, and ultimately that's how a winning streak starts. You start by pushing the needle, forcing Republicans to play defense in places they shouldn't be, in getting, flipping some seats, getting close to flipping others. We definitely showed that, we can run a viable campaign in some of these districts where Republicans thought that they never would have to play in again. So here's the recap. 1, localize the issue. Even if it's a national talking point, find a local story to make it relatable to the voters in the district. 2, money matters. You've got to have the funds to get your message out. And if you're outspent 5-1, it's going to be hard to break through whenever they have so much money on the other side. And then 3, the only way you can really get your message out is fundraising, besides the third lesson, which is out organizing the other side. Especially whenever you're being beat, in paid media, you've got to have a way to combat that. And for us, it was talking to voters over the phone and at the door. We were able to do this really effectively. I think it made a huge difference in the results. I think the reason why the turnout was so much higher was because we were talking to voters 3 or 4 times before they went to go vote. And the fourth lesson is that you've got to draw a contrast. They're going to define you. They're going to define your candidate. They're going to define your message unless you go out there and beat them back. And we weren't able to do that in this race. I think that's what made the difference at the end of the day. And as a candidate or a staffer, you've got to make those decisions, and you've got to pull the trigger on the contrast or on the negative messaging. At the end of the day, we can't play nice. We can't have we can't be riding our high horse. We've got to go out and win. And if you take just one action from this video, go download the free Winning Playbook. This is a full guide on lessons I learned from that race, on a budget I would build today if I was managing a campaign of this size, on how to fundraise, which is always going to be the essential of a campaign, is raising money. That guide covers all of it. Go check it out in the description, download it, and take a look. When I was a first-time campaign manager a little over 10 years ago, I would have loved to have that Winning Playbook to kind of go off of. I would have loved to have a video like this to watch and kind of take bits and pieces from. So please like and share and subscribe down below if you like more of this content. Share this with someone in your network. If you have someone in your network who's managing a race, or is a first-time candidate, or is even just thinking about running for office. These lessons are so important, I think, for all first-time candidates and staffers to take and internalize and apply whenever they can. If you want more content like this and more how-to guides like this, subscribe down below, drop a comment on what you found helpful in this video, and I'll see you next time.